Hall, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock. Thank you once again for joining us. We have new content today, just as we do every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We had it before the pandemic, right through the pandemic, and we're going to have new content right through the holidays too. So feel free. Please, we do ask that you like, comment, subscribe, share this program, help us push back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda. And if you can't watch the program today on Facebook, you can download it and listen to it later on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. And boy, oh boy, do we ever have a great show for you today. We have a good friend of the show. He's been on many times before. Pierre Poilievre, Member of Parliament for Carleton. He's also the Shadow Minister for Finance. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you.
Well, we have a lot to unpack here, so let's get right at it. Let's talk about the fiscal update. And now we have a lot of buzzwords being bantered around, something you outlined in your op-ed today in the National Post, talking about it's time to move beyond Canada's credit card economy. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, yes, Chrystia Freeland has a new idea, and it involves your bank account. She's calling it a preloaded stimulus. They always have a buzzword whenever they come up with a big idea to spend your money. And basically, she's complaining that Canadians are saving too much money. She's looked at the data and rightly found that a lot of Canadians are stashing their cash in the accounts because they've learned the lesson that you always need a buffer, a lesson the government would be well to learn itself. But she would like to, quote unquote, find ways for the government to unlock those savings and put them to work on her so-called stimulus programs. She believes that if we just turn taxpayers upside down and shake them by the ankles, enough money will come pouring out to stimulate the economy. This is kind of the opposite of what we need to be doing. In fact, savings are good. Savings are not only good for the people who save them, but also because banks relend that money to small businesses who then pay them out in wages to workers who then save more money, and thus a virtuous cycle results. Furthermore, savings don't just have to sit in a bank account. They can move into an RRSP or TFSA, where they're invested in directly in companies' stocks and bonds, and also grow the economy. They help fund the construction of new factories, warehouses, pipelines, mines, softwares, all things that generate new income. So that's what we should be doing more of. And to sum it up, we need to put the credit card down and pick the paychecks up. Go from a credit card economy to a paycheck economy.
But Pierre, if individuals are keeping more of the money they earn and are making choices for themselves, well, how does the government then not pick winners and losers in the marketplace, or then take money and, like we've seen in Ontario through the green energy program that picked solar panels and windmills, which turned out to be disastrous for anyone who owned a business or trying to do a business or any piece of their life through the day when electricity prices are through the roof?
Well, the liberal mentality today is that politicians can spend your money better than you can. So they believe they have the right to take your cash and spend it how they want because they think they're more enlightened. This enlightened, paternalizing socialist approach has been tried again and again throughout history. It's always proven wrong, and we find that the common sense of the common people is superior to any central planning that politicians can carry out. So that's why conservatives believe in restoring free enterprise. The free enterprise system allows individual Canadians to decide how to spend and invest their own money. That a dollar in the hands of the person who earned it is always more productive than in the hands of the politician who taxed it. Thus, we're not going to come after people's savings the way Chrystia Freeland proposes. We're going to empower people to make free decisions for themselves.
So let's talk about the government's fiscal update. We're looking at a $381 billion deficit and a debt to GDP ratio that's rising from 31% last year to 56%. We're coming up to that cliff we saw in the mid-1990s.
Indeed. To put it in perspective, the $381 billion deficit, which is on the low end of the projections, is already 7 times bigger than the previous all-time record in nominal dollar values. It is bigger as a share of our economy than at any time before or since the Second World War. And the government is now spending more than twice as much than it takes in, borrowing, of course, to make up the difference. This has taken our debt to GDP ratio from the low levels that Harper left it at of roughly 30% and raised it to 50%. Within a few years, it is projected to rise to about 56%. To put it into perspective, we hit the debt cliff in the 1990s when our debt to GDP ratio was 66%. So we're within a couple of years, we'll be within 10 percentage points of the cliff edge that caused a crisis in the mid-90s. Now, we don't know exactly where the cliff is because times change, interest rates and market conditions are different. However, we do know we're running very quickly towards the cliff edge in a fog, so we don't know where the edge is. But if you were running through a fog towards a cliff edge as fast as possible, you would probably say, I should stop this now because at any moment I could fly off the edge. And once you do that, it's too late. So we're saying stop running towards the cliff, avoid sending our economy hurling into the abyss, but instead phase out the deficit, stabilize the debt to GDP ratio, and protect our programs and our taxpayers.
So to calm some of our critics down, the money you're talking about, not all of it, when you're talking about the $381 billion deficit, has been spent on relief programs like the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, the rent subsidy, you name it. There's only a very, I would say, relatively small portion of that was actually support payments for Canadians.
Yes, of the $380 billion deficit, only about $175 billion is explained by the CERB, the wage subsidy, and the small business SEBA loans. The rest is either deficits that were already baked into our annual finances from the previous year, or spending on God knows what. This deficit is worth $40,000 for every family of four. I don't know a single family of four that's got 40 grand in benefits from this government since March. There are some that have had, 10 or 20, if a couple of people have been on the CERB for the full duration, but nobody that I can find has had 40, and certainly that's not the average of benefit that the Canadians have received. So clearly what's happening is that the money is being gobbled up by middlemen. We've seen, a casino company got $200 million. They tried to give $500 million to We. They sent CERB checks to prisoners and told their bureaucrats to send out CERB even when they suspected there was fraud. There have been billions of dollars in CERB benefits to people whose incomes are above $200,000 a year. And they even sent wage subsidies to companies that then use the money for dividends rather than for workers. So a lot of the money is being gobbled up by very wealthy and well-connected interests who are expert at enriching themselves off the state. And only a minority of the dollars have reached grassroots Canadians in need. And so that's fundamentally the problem. And if you don't believe that, think of it this way. We have by far the biggest deficit in the G20 as a share of our GDP. The vast majority of countries have deficits to GDP that are about half of ours, and yet they've had better results. Many of them have had lower COVID mortality rates. Many of them, and on almost all of them, have lower unemployment rates. So we've spent the most to get the worst results.
If anyone was watching the Committee of the Whole performance, where you went head to head with the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, I don't think anybody could actually walk away from watching that and saying, wow, the Finance Minister actually answered every single question. I don't think she actually answered any of your questions, and one of which was really sticking out in my mind after watching that when the Liberals say we have our debt locked in at low interest rates, that is true to a point, but it's very short term.
No, it's not true at all, actually. The interest rates are highly variable. What they've suggested, what they've told us is that they're going to lock in our debt by selling 10 and 30-year bonds. If they did that, that would freeze our interest rates at today's low levels for 10 or even 30 years. So I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. Are they actually doing it? And sure enough, they're not. 85% of the new debt issued since March is for terms of less than 10 years, and 75% is for terms of less than 4 years. So let's get this straight. For every dollar of new debt the government has issued since March, and it's a hell of a lot of new debt, only one quarter is locked in for more than 4 years. The rest we'll have to come up for renewal in 90 days, in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years. If interest rates rise then the cost of servicing this new debt will rise quickly. So it's kind of like when you go get a mortgage. If rates are at record lows, you want to lock in that rate with a 5-year fixed. You don't want to go with a variable, because if rates rise, then you'll start paying those higher rates immediately. Well, our government is going with effectively a variable rate mortgage, which makes us extremely susceptible to sudden and unexpected rises in interest rates. And before people say, oh, interest rates will never rise, the governor of the Bank of Canada has said so. He's the governor, not God. The governor of Bank of Canada can influence rates, but there's a big misconception that he can control rates. If rates start rising around the world as other countries recover their economies more quickly than we do, or if inflation rises more quickly than expected, rates will go up whether he wants them to or not. He cannot force any private actor to lend money at lower rates than that actor chooses. So rates can rise even when bank governors don't want them to. They did in the late 70s under the previous Trudeau. From 1978 to 1980, interest rates rose from 8% to 22%. Just put that in perspective, a 14 percentage point increase in just 2 years. The rates almost tripled. And I can tell you, no governor of any bank wanted that to happen. It just did, because numbers rule the universe. And when there's not enough lenders and there's too many borrowers, or when inflation runs wild, rates will increase, whether we want them to or not. That could happen. And because our government has not locked in low rates on our debt, that will put our national finances in great peril.
Well, the Bank of Canada, according to your article and the news released on their website, is showing that business investment will grow just 0.8% over the next 2 years, looking probably 2023 or beyond until we recover. So government spending with consumption, it's going to represent about 80% of economic growth in the next 2 years, while investment and net export growth, which actually produce wealth, which we need to fund many government programs and services, will be less than zero. That's extremely concerning.
Yes. So to put it in perspective, investment collapsed during COVID. Investment, which was already low,
it was,
and has been flat since 2014, collapsed even further during COVID. The Bank of Canada says it will be at least 2023 before we get back to 2019 levels. So that's how bad it is. Over the next 2 years, the investment, that is to say, the money that we plow into new factories, plants, pipelines, software, R&D, that the amount we put into that will not recover to 2019 levels till at least 2023. It will only grow from our current extremely low levels by 0.8% over the next 2 years, which means next to nothing. And so what does this mean? It means that almost all of our growth will come from two things: debt-fueled consumption and debt-fueled government spending, both of which drain our savings and add to our debt. Meanwhile, the things that allow us to add savings and pay off debt, which are investment and net exports, those two combined will actually drop. So we're going to net exports, which is to say the amount we sell versus the amount we buy, and investment are going to drop. The things that generate wealth are going down. The things that consume and vaporize wealth are going up. That means our economy will be more indebted, we'll have less savings, and we'll be more dependent on the rest of the world for the goods and services that we need for a good life.
Pierre, I know you have to go. You have question period coming up at 2:15. You have a few questions here. Let's close it out. Give us some final remarks. It's all yours.
Well, there's a better way. We can go from the credit card economy to the paycheck economy, and here's how. The government could fast track approval of natural resource projects. There's a $14 billion natural gas liquefaction project in Quebec waiting approval. They could approve the $20 billion Tech Frontier mine in northern Alberta. That's two projects, one in Alberta, one in Quebec, $35 billion of new economic activity. There's about $6 billion more in smaller tactical pipelines and other resource projects just waiting federal approval, needing no tax dollars to go ahead. They could knock down interprovincial trade barriers so we can buy from each other rather than just importing cheap junk from abroad. We could change our intellectual property rules to keep more of the income generating patents that we develop here in our country rather than selling them to foreigners. We could pressure the provinces to get occupational licensing bodies to fast track the recognition of credentials for new immigrants who come to Canada with skills in the trades or the professions so that their incomes can rocket as they go into their field of training as doctors, mechanics, architects, and more. We could change the tax and regulatory obstacles that block First Nations communities from starting enterprises and developing their resources. We could reform our tax system to reward rather than punish work, savings, and investment. All of these things would unleash the mighty force of our 20 million Canadian workers. It means it's time to put down the credit card and pick up the paycheck. We have work to do.
I love your enthusiasm and I support you 100%. Pierre, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. Good luck in question period. You're a surgeon as always. Go get them.
Excellent. Great to be with you. Thanks for your show.
Pierre Poilievre, the Member of Parliament for Carleton, he's also the Shadow Minister for Finance for Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. We appreciate his time and his words and also his path forward as we look to form the next government of Canada whenever that next election will come up. Don't forget, as I mentioned right off the top, we have new content every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you can't watch the whole program now, you can download it, listen to it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it's out there, pushing back against the ever-moving Liberal agenda, and you can help us do it. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the